Welcome to Diversity of Tactics. This is a show primarily about the political left and approaching common goals through different paths. On today's episode, we have Touring News. Is it Touring?
Yes,
Touring?
correct. Touring.
Touring.
Yep.
Touring News. So, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hello. Hi. Nice to see all of you out there in the YouTube community or wherever you might be viewing the video. Yes, I am Touring News. You can call me Brad if you want to, or Touring. Either way really works for me. I began broadcasting on Twitch and I guess like really getting involved in like news broadcasting or like some form of journalism at the end of February 2019. So I am still pretty new at the whole like content generation or things like this. However, while it is only like a 9-month-old channel, I have broadcast about like 1,700 or 1,800 hours on Twitch. So I have put in a lot of time and effort into it. Yeah, I like to talk about geopolitics, geoeconomics, international trade, climate, agriculture, pollution, things like this. So yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for volunteering for my interrogation. All right, so let's start off easy. So, would you consider yourself to be on the left politically?
Yeah, I do. Originally, when I began on Twitch, I didn't want to give out like any of my leanings or anything like this, and I really tried for a long time to not divulge like where I fell politically. But I kind of found out that the nature of Twitch itself as like a platform, it isn't possible to do that because there's always people coming into your channel because they're always asking you questions. You have to become too much a part of the story. Whereas if you're just creating YouTube video content, I think that you can actually just present information. Whereas being on Twitch and always being in the back and forth with the community, I think that it's too hard to keep yourself out of it. So I did have to like show my cards or things like this. And yeah, I do consider myself on the left.
So, do you think Twitch inherently is more personal in that way? Is that something that you like or suits you?
I actually probably, if I could go back in time and do things a little bit differently, I would not have chosen to do it this way. Um, I really wanted to be able to do, okay, so like my mission statement when I began was I wanted to make like an interactive news channel. That
Mm.
way you could get around like my selection bias of stories by people from the chat linking a story into me. And if I could offset the selection of the stories, we could further remove like the broadcaster's bias. But as like time went on and as like a community develops like a relationship with the streamer and as I developed a relationship with individuals in the community, it began to get into like the parasocial relationships and it makes it very, very difficult. Yeah, it's a very heavy relationship, I would say, to get into.
Do you think it's taxing for you?
Uh, yes, I don't really get too emotionally involved in like the people that are a part of my community. I kind of had to, I guess, recently even like push back away from that a little bit. You often, or people maybe often hear streamers say that like, it's a lot to manage like individual relationships with community people and maintain the stream and maintain the information and everything like this. So I have kind of been wanting to step back away from that a little bit and really just like focus on like the work and the information and this type of stuff.
All right. I think that's very interesting. It also seems like that's sort of like the brand that you're going for. Is that correct? Like, is that like a conscious effort in sort of creating a news sort of brand? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did want to do news, like right from when I came on because I felt that there was I thought that even if it's only three people, if three people read a news article together and they discuss it together, the chances of coming to an understanding or rooting out the biases of that article are much better. So I thought that as you continued to grow, you'd be reaching to more like accurate information and less biased information because you're kind of exploring it as a community. What I am worried about, however, is in order to maintain a level of profitability for a channel such as this or like a sustainable economic model, you almost have to reach a level of viewership that makes the actual like communication back and forth much more difficult. So you are hosting long form video conversations back and forth between you and me. imagine trying to host long form conversations with even I only have 32 people on my channel right now. But imagine trying to do that on like a person to person basis. I kind of think that what I tried to do can't entirely be accomplished, so I'm kind of having to reevaluate a little bit how I'm going to be creating my content moving forward and what like if I can have a little bit of a different personality on different platforms. Meaning like could my YouTube content be just news, be just like a boring delivery, whereas maybe the YouTube would be more of the back and forth and the conversation and things like this. Sorry if I'm giving you a lot
No,
to like
that's
speak of.
completely fine. However much you want to go into each topic is fine. I have a lot prepared, so.
Okay.
So how important do you think this sort of thinking about your brand and your image is on Twitch and I guess on other platforms as well? Like, do you think it's important to have a defined image or brand?
For a couple of reasons, yes, I think it's important to. Mainly, it's like what can kind of, I guess, like attract people to you. Oftentimes, people say like they need a leader to do this or to do that, but then at the same time, you want like decentralized like positions of power. So, for better or worse, we are a very brand centric species at the moment where we put a lot of like value into like a curated image of an individual. And when I was on a different show the other day, they were talking about, well, would your quote unquote, because somebody was mentioning they kind of create a character for when they stream. And we were having that kind of conversation back and forth. And they asked me, well, Touring, is your character trying to be more boring or more stoic like than you typically are? I have tried to go that route because I think that we need to return to that type of journalism. I have found that road difficult to go along because of the nature of Twitch and of being in front of I've been in front of a camera right now for 4 hours and 54 minutes. So to never have like a moment of like, breaking your serious nature or anything like this, it becomes like a very difficult way that like content creators pigeonhole themselves into. Final thing that I wanted to say about this whole thing. Um, some people think that you can begin farming drama and clicks and clickbait, and then you can convert to doing serious work afterwards. I disagree with this 100%. I think that if you don't begin and try to stick by a set of ethics at the onset, I don't think that you can regain your audience back from them becoming conditioned into wanting that blood sport or the drama or the reaction or things like this.
So do you think it's important to be serious when delivering news? Is that something? Yeah.
There is something to be said for diversity of tactics, diversity of streams, diversity of dissemination of information. Everybody can have their own niche. Everybody can have their own like style. I do get leery of people that interject too much humor into what is actual news information because then I just don't like it. It's not my style. I understand why some people like it. I understand why some people think that they need what a little bit of a gentler delivery that might like have like a little bit of smiles and a little bit of happiness into it. It's not the style that I appreciate. It's not one that I like to consume information through. If I watch a YouTube video, I want the video to be serious. um, is there room for humor within it? Yeah, because I mean, look at John Oliver. I was watching his slap suit about the Coal Baron, and like how he had that great music video about Bob. Yeah, it was incredible. So it really does get the message across. Um, I think that we need to lift up the serious news channels once again and try to have them gain like an equal footing to some of the others.
Yeah, because that sort of thing I think is very interesting because oftentimes I can sort of see the perspective of having like the serious news that is as unbiased as can possibly be, but it seems like at least in recent times that it doesn't reach as many people when it's sort of more like the serious stoic type of news that's like holding on to the facts, while shows like John Oliver are like the most popular shows. So like, do you think would you rather have fewer people learn about news in sort of the serious way, or would you rather have a broad audience of people having like humor mixed with news?
Are you asking like my community personally, or
No,
like
but like in
my
general,
view?
how like
Mm,
would you rather have more people sort of have a general idea about the news? Like let's just say in the
mhm,
US, I guess.
mhm.
Or yeah.
Um, I'll take any kind of victories that we can get. So any way that people want to become getting more engaged, more informed, I will take those victories. Um, I feel that we're at a very difficult moment on the state of just information exchange, because there are very few sources that can be accepted by people from different communities. There's very few individuals that do have a reach into different sides of the political spectrum. So I don't know how we can entirely remove the growth of echo chambers, because like just by having a paywall on a news website, you're developing, an echo chamber in that way, or like even just like by people having to click onto your website, there is already a little bit of a chamber there. I don't entirely have the answers onto how to bring it back. um I don't see it getting better anytime in the near future, due to, you can look at even independent media, such people like Kyle Kalinske, David Pakman, Tim Pool, Bad Empanada, whoever you want to look at. I have seen the titling of their videos kind of become more and more extreme in order to fight against like the down ranking of the YouTube algorithms and everything. So I feel that a lot of people in content creation are struggling to just survive right now,
Yeah.
and that's forcing them to engage in tactics that, if they evaluated their original mission statement from when they got into producing content, I think that they would be disappointed in themselves for some of the lengths that they've taken in order to garner a market share and an audience. And I feel the pressure every single day. Yeah.
So you said something there about sort of having news that could be viewed from like both sides or like from the
hmm
center or whatever. Is that something you're trying to achieve? Do you try to reach across the aisle?
Yeah, I do. And really what I want to do on YouTube, and I need to start doing this, is I want to do like my own news segment every day, whether it's like a 15 or 30-minute segment that just covers like what my community and I stumbled across in like that 24-hour period. And during that broadcast, it's not going to be, I think this is what the solution should be, or I think that's what the solution should be. It would mostly just be like a rundown of like 10 different newspapers from around the world to try to put that information into something that can be listened to quickly, absorbed, be sourced, be cited, and maybe be some kind of way that people from both parties can view. I do have a pretty big crossover with some of the conservative communities on Twitch, because I've tried to get my community not to just like shout them down, maybe like as much as they might run into in some other places. But it's really difficult because I get into climate conversations, and then that kind of like gets me a little bit irritated
Yeah.
quickly. See, somebody just came in, iDubbbz TV. They've been around here pretty frequently, but they came in with the Trump 2020, and
Yep.
you know,
Right. So do you care about changing people's behavior? Is that something you value?
do I care about changing people's behavior?
Yeah.
Um, oh, I don't want to say this, but yes, I would probably say I do. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't like to admit that really, but yes, yeah, I do.
No, I mean that's fine because that's often something I think about when people try to sort of present news. Like most news organizations have sort of like a bias, and like no matter, well, at least I think so. I don't think it's possible to sort of deliver news in a completely unbiased way. Do you think
hmm
that's possible?
Do I think news can be delivered in an unbiased way? No. Like I said, you have selection bias, you have writer bias, you have the stories that aren't getting covered. There's a lot of like, can you limit the bias to get to like something pretty decent? I think that you can. I often read Reuters and Bloomberg very frequently. I think that they're two of the better news sources in the United States to get at least like business unbiased news. And the reason why I say it this way is because, this is my opinion, millionaires and billionaires do not like to be misinformed. They require information because they care a lot about money. So I have kind of found that those two sources are really kind of speaking to the elite and rich class, and they don't really get into the left or the right all that much. I think that they just do like a decent job of reporting.
So, what led you to sort of starting your own news channel or whatever you call it? Do you call it a news channel?
Uh, at some days, yes. Some days I do. Yeah, what led me to start it? I had been interested for a very long time in environmental policy, whether it was like in my early teens, in my early 20s. I quit in like my late teens, and I quit in my mid to late 20s, just really caring. I thought that people weren't listening. There was nobody that was really like trying to take a step or anything. When I finally eventually got back involved in my later 20s, maybe like 28, 29, I was looking around at different news organizations that I could apply to. I tried to send out a couple applications, but I didn't really have a resume. I didn't really have like a formal background in journalism or anything like this. So I kind of had floated the idea of doing, news broadcasting on some type of social media platform for an extended period of time. I didn't really think of doing YouTube because, like I said, I wanted to do that, like that back and forth of like the always having like an audience to be able to fact check and verify. Eventually, I just sat down one day and I turned on the camera, and kind of like since then, I've just left the camera be on. I don't have any kind of backup plan, so this is what I have to, this is what I have to make work.
That's interesting. All right, so I guess let's move on to the first real topic. The first real topic is sort of, I guess, the mainstream media, or I guess, yeah, the news cycle.
Okay.
So, do you think the mainstream media, or like I guess in general, the media in the U.S. has sort of like a liberal bias?
Do I think the mainstream media in the United States has a liberal bias? Um,
So I guess in the way that
no, it's
maybe
okay.
Donald Trump
It's
would,
okay.
yeah.
No, it's okay. I just need to think about how I want to answer this. Um, this is the hardest question to answer. In a yes, I'll give it with a little. I'll give it a partial yes. I There's a certain party that denies that climate change has anything to do with human interference, and there's a certain party that doesn't. This has really been one of the biggest wedges in like the divide in the United States, and uh, I guess for this reason alone, I'll say yes.
Do do you think it's important for the media to be unbiased?
Yeah, I do. And somebody said it very well here. It has a corporate bias more so, and yeah, I think it is important for the media to do so. I don't see a way that it's going to repair itself easily. I don't. There's been too much consolidation in media. Too many people are, like I said, surviving on scraps. I don't know how it's going to be repaired quickly.
Do you
These are the hardest questions. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, that's fine. Take all the time you want. Um, so do you think the media has too much influence on like the political landscape?
Um, I would say no, because I don't think that we don't really have good verifiable media at the moment. I don't know. Ever since like the internet has like put so much information out there for people, it's harder and harder to find verifiable like factual information. So on one hand, while the media does have a ton of time and power, you only well, actually, yes, they do. Okay, yeah, they do. I'm thinking about the DNC debates and the way they frame things. Yes, they do. Yeah, the media does have too much power.
Well, that was actually my next question. So, what do you think about the relationship between the media and the political debates? Like, I guess the recent political debates. Do you think it's
I think it's appalling. I think that they should be broadcast at a nonprofit. I think that they shouldn't be done by different organizations, whether that's MSNBC, CNN. I think that it's I think it's a crime against the people. Putting it on things like that and not just having it on like PBS or some type of way that the entire public can see it. Yeah, I think it's an absolute. It's a shame. It's a sham. It's a shame. We need to. Well, we have a lot of work to do. Yeah.
what do you think about the concept of state-owned media or like a state-funded media corporation? It's like completely devoid of like private money.
I don't like corporate owned media and I don't like state owned media. You know, like it's if there is one entity that shouldn't really care about advertising or profits or things like this, it's journalism. I really have a feeling that there are so many people out there that get into journalism, similar to maybe how they get into politics, and they think like, you know what, I'm going to be the one that like turns this sector around, or I'm going to be the one that turns that around. At the end of the day, they need to pay their bills, they need to make rent, they need to deal with this, they need to deal with that. So you either I think that we're going to be getting into some type of government assisted, funded journalism. You know, I mean, some of the different candidates are floating ideas out there of how they can seed local journalism or embed different reporters within certain newspapers around the country in order to try to like return to local grassroots reporting. Um, there should be some state sponsored media. I think having a few is okay, and then I think having some private to compete against it is okay. I think that we just need. Oh, go ahead if you have another question. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Keep going. I guess I can sort of ask like a follow up. What do you think is the best way to fund media?
Yeah, so somebody is talking about like public owned. Yeah, that would be very nice. The best way to fund media.
Is it just an independent sort of donation based, subscription based thing, or
Um, the best way to fund media. I don't have this answer. I don't have it at all. Um, yeah, at
it's a
all.
hard question. I guess so. The way that we do it in Denmark is that we have sort of very different models. We have sort of the completely private owned media, as I guess as you have most of in the US, and then we have one media company that is completely state funded, like gets all of their money through taxes, and everybody sort of pays
Hmm.
taxes, sort of to this company, and then they also are responsible for hosting like the political debates and stuff for everyone to see. So sort of takes care of that problem. And then we have sort of a combination where there is a private company which is partially paid by the state to sort of compete with like the state, completely state funded one. But
Hmm.
they also advertise and do stuff like that. So I guess, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, well, one thing like I've watched a couple trials, not trials, Senate hearing committee meetings about the amount of revenue that was lost from newspapers to Google and to Facebook over like a 10-year
Yeah.
period. And it's really amazing where advertising revenue once was on, you know, the classified section in a newspaper, and now it just goes to Google and Facebook. So I'm thinking that something is going to have to give where tech conglomerates are going to have to be taken to task, held to account, disassembled in like some type of way in order to redistribute what was once revenue captured by the actual writers, and their business model is going to have to be reevaluated. We need, well, the main answer is we need more public companies. Yeah, companies that aren't necessarily for profit or state owned, just a publicly owned company that maybe I don't know. These are the toughest questions you might be able to be asking.
All right, so I guess to sort of conclude this topic, is there any media sources that you would recommend, like specifically that you use frequently?
Well, okay, so yeah, like I was mentioning, I do use Reuters and Bloomberg. I think if you want to understand the globe, you need to understand macro business trends. So I think that you really need to look at like bond markets, interest rates, um, mortgage rates. You need to look at negative interest rates in Europe. You need to understand currency defaults. You need to know like what's going on in Argentina and all these kind of places. So I do like to start there. But what I would really say to people is, if you have the time, read two sources that you consider on the left, read one that you think is in the center, read two that are on the right, or one and one, or even one on the left and one on the right. and try to come up with your kind of concept based off of that. Um, if you're only reading one source on a topic, you're probably not getting as accurate of information as you wish, even if you're only reading Bloomberg like I was doing or Reuters like you were doing. So I think that diversifying where you are getting your information from as much as you have time to is very, very important. Um, and case in point would be most times off stream, I watch right wing leaning videos or read right leaning news sources because I need to stay informed as to what like all discussions are being had on certain topics.
What do you think about Fox News?
I don't look at it all that much because of their climate stances. It's just I kind of feel that it is okay, you can look up there was a good like docudrama called The Loudest Voice that I think Showtime put out, and it did like an in-depth behind the scenes look at how Roger Ailes wanted to turn the Fox News into the conservative arm for the Conservative Party. And I mean, you don't even have to dig all that deep to find out the amount of times that they said we want to be, this arm of the news. They don't really have the best of journalistic integrity or standards. I think that if you are comparing CNN and Fox, I think that Fox is more egregious. I think they both have flaws. I think it's much easier to document the flaws of Fox News. I think it's much easier to debunk the flaws of Fox News. Um, so if I had to pick one of the two of them, I think CNN does a better job of actually just reporting information.
Which debate do you think was the best one? That was you said you really hated sort of the way that the debates, the Democratic debates, have been hosted so far. So is there one you think was the best one night, or I guess the one by MSNBC or CNN or whatever?
I may not be able to answer this. I was broadcasting a few of the debates on my stream, so I was mostly trying to manage like my community from not saying anything too crazy, and I wasn't entirely listening to the debates.
Fair enough.
I don't like any debates that give 10 people 45 seconds to speak and then you have to like be interrupted by another person. So for me, I mean, okay, so here's what I'll say about the debates. I think the first debate had 22 million people watch. I think the most recent debate had 6.2 million people watch. So my biggest statement on the debates is they are not all that useful as far as like conveying actual like ideas, positions. If you want to know what candidates actually truly feel, you have to read their policy papers on their websites. You have to watch when they go on, the Breakfast Club with Charlemagne, or you have to watch when Bernie went on to like speak like in long form conversations with he did one with like Chapo Trap House or things like this. So if you really want to know what candidates stand for, I don't think that watching them on the debate stage is all that great. Now, when I'm saying this, however, one good thing that the debates show is how people can handle being under pressure, being under the spotlight. Are you going to stumble? Are you going to look down at your notes all the time? Can you get off of your talking points? Can you think on your feet quickly? So, to me, the only thing that the debates really do is go to show, I guess, who is able to be on their feet the quickest. I think that's really the biggest takeaway.
So is there a format that you would prefer for the debates? I mean, if you can just off the top of your head.
Yeah, I think 2 nights, 5 people apiece. I think even if you just got it down to 5 people, I think that you could get into a much better back and forth. About the same amount of time, but just not having 10 people up on the stage. I think that really, even if you just, because I've had some podcasts on my show, and anytime that you get more than like 5 people, it's really, really difficult for everybody to get screen time, and then you're trying to like shout down one another. Secondly, the biggest way to improve debates would be implementing ranked choice voting. As you do ranked choice voting, then you're not going to be, let's say that you and I were running on the same ticket and there's 8 other people running. I'm not going to personally attack you as much anymore because maybe I need your supporters to vote for me second. So I think that going into an election system such as that is really going to improve debating because then people are going to be on policy and not on personal attacks. So.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess that sort of segues us perfectly into sort of the next topic, which is sort of like international politics and a bit about U.S. foreign policy.
Mm.
So you talked about like ranked choice voting and sort of like the way the ticket system works in the U.S. So what do you think in general about sort of like the two-party system in the U.S.?
Um, I I don't like it that much. I can't change it overnight, and neither party has any desire to develop more parties because that's going to give the election to the other side. So even if there were people in the Conservative Party that wanted to break out and create like a new Conservative Party, they are going to be discouraged to run because then people are going to say, "Oh, well, you're splitting the Republican vote, and you're going to hand the election off to the other side." So there is not an easy way to reform it at the moment. I don't think. Look at Bernie. I mean, Bernie's running Democratic, even though he considers himself independent or
Yeah,
a
yeah.
third party.
Yeah, I think that's really sort of like an interesting thing where in the U.S. sort of like somebody from like a minor part of like like a minor part of the constituency or a party can actually end up becoming like a president or like representing something that's usually been like, for example, if Bernie becomes president, right? Like
Hmm.
he would be sort of the president from the Democratic Party, but he wouldn't be a Democrat. I think that's sort of like I don't know if you can see that really anywhere else in the world. I don't know how much do you know about like different party systems in different places in the world.
I, I try to keep informed. I will make the analogy maybe that it's people that live in the United States are we don't really have like a high adoption of being bilingual. And if you don't learn a second language when you're very young, it becomes more and more difficult to learn a second language as you get older. I think that for Americans to learn how multiple party systems can work, I think it's actually really difficult for us to even fathom, like the parliamentary coalition building that's required, or some of these like parliamentary governments. I try to keep as best informed as I can, where you need to get like this bit of the block, and then that's how you elect the prime minister and everything. It's hard for me to fully understand, I would say.
Yeah, I guess that's sort of it's also really hard to understand coming from like the Danish system where we sort of have, I think right now, 12, I think 12 or
Hmm.
13 political parties. And I guess in theory it kind of works similarly as the US, where you sort of have like the two sides. So you have like the blue side and the red side, and sort of the entire red side comes together. And but the key difference is that you have sort of concrete numbers of how much influence sort of the part of the side has. So, for example, if you have like the Tea Party in the U.S., like if the Tea Party had 20% of like the red vote, they would have sort of
Hmm.
that much to say in sort of like the government structure. Yeah. But yeah, something that I think was really interesting in sort of this aspect was, do you think the two-party system leads to more unity?
Do I think the two-party system leads to more unity? Um, no, I don't think so. I think it leads to more blind faith, which could be misconstrued as unity. But I don't really think that that is like a tenable unity.
So, do you think sort of the nature of the two-party system leads people to be more, I guess, divided across party lines? So it becomes like sort of the team A versus team B. Um,
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I 100% think so. I think that so many people are unwilling to give an inch on one position because they feel they're going to be excised from that group, and then they're going to be just like a cast off in the center that nobody wants to associate with in the United States. So I feel that there is a very big group of conservatives and liberals alike who may support 70% of whatever their party supports and not 30% of it, but they're afraid to voice that displeasure because they don't want to be, cast aside from any type of viability.
so, why do you think the U.S. has sort of like insanely low voter turnout, like compared to like most other places that have like democratic systems?
Um, logjam of Congress, the partisan nature of it, the feeling that like your vote might not matter if you live in a certain state or in a certain region, um, a lack a success of the Red Scare, and saying that like government is bad and this and that, just despair, low morale, low lack of faith in institutions and in the system. I think that there's a myriad of issues, I would say.
All right. So let's talk about Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
I is he your preferred political candidate? I would.
Yes, he is. I'm
Yeah.
going canvassing for Bernie Sanders tomorrow night, actually.
Yeah. So, what do you think of Bernie's chances in the 2020?
I think if Bernie gets the Democratic nomination, I think he has an excellent chance, slash the best chance of any Democratic candidate beating Donald Trump in a runoff. It does feel it's difficult to get Democrats to vote for Bernie when there are other people in the field that are taking his policies. But I think that as long as people continue to, have the biggest grassroots movement for Bernie, as long as people keep knocking on doors, as long as he keeps delivering the message, I do think that he can turn enough votes to get the nomination.
The Democratic nomination?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. I think that's really the only thing like way. I think that if he gets the Democratic nomination, I don't think he's really going to struggle all that much in beating Trump. I really think that he can win back states like Pennsylvania, like West Virginia, like Ohio, all of the economically impoverished states. I was just reading a statistic today that there was a dairy farmer who hasn't turned a profit in 3 years, but he's still supporting Trump because he thinks that eventually, it's going to turn around. I think that some of these people are misguided in thinking that Trump's economic policies are ever really going to rebound and benefit them. So I think that you need Bernie Sanders to go in and talk about like what's actually happening in U.S. economics.
Who do you think is his biggest competition?
Who do I think is Bernie's biggest competition?
Yeah, in the Democratic primary.
Um, Bernie personally, it is kind of feeling. Man, I can't believe I'm about to say this. I feel that Andrew Yang is taking a lot of votes away from potential Bernie supporters. When I've been going out in the public lately, I have been hearing more and more people talking about, well, I need this $1,000 a month right now. Like, what is Bernie going to do that's going to help me as soon as he gets into office? And I try to talk to them about, Medicare for all, about lowering their healthcare bills, about like empowering the workers, about incentivizing unions to reform, about free public education, things like this. And they consistently just say, well, I need that $1,000 a month right now. So it feels like Yang has taken a lot of Bernie support. I would imagine Warren has probably taken a decent amount of Bernie support as well.
Yeah, because if you look at like the stats for like who people's second choice would be, I think Andrew Yang's base has like one of the largest supports for like Bernie's second, if Yang doesn't make it, right? So
people did not hear me say a certain person's name. I didn't say Biden's name. I do not understand how Biden can still maintain any level of respectability. So I don't give him any credit. I think that he is just a lame duck that is eventually going to crash.
Yeah. But he shares a lot of support with Bernie as well, right?
That I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know the polling data for it.
So I guess, what do you think are Bernie's strongest points?
First, I would say consistency. Decades of being on the same message. Second, I would say he's for the workers. Third, he's for equality. Just like the scope of his work, the magnitude of what he stands for, the fact that he has never compromised, his voting record. We could turn this into like a 2-hour thing of what Bernie is strong on.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, I'm just trying to sort of get a feeling for like what you think is important, I guess, from Bernie's platform.
Well, what's important is his. I mean, I think the attack against the accumulation of wealth by the 1%. I think that he has been spot on from the 80s, 90s, and all the way. Well, I mean, even back further, and talking about like the accumulation of power to the top, the income inequality gap, the amount of homeless people that we have in the nation, the amount of people that we have seeking actual employment or gainful employment. He's talked about uncoupling health insurance from place of employment for decades. He's talked about helping education systems for decades. Um, he voted against the Iraq War. He voted against all three of the military spending bills. He's coming out against the military-industrial complex. He marched in the civil rights movement. He's been on the picket lines with workers. So I think that you can just look at issue after issue after issue, and you can say, "Hey, Bernie's not with corporations. He's with people," and it's very, very rare to ever hear that about a politician anymore.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess let's turn it around. What do you think are sort of his weakest points? Why isn't he more popular?
The Red Scare, still holding over from the 1950s. Long-term anti-worker propaganda. A long time, as long as American businesses are giving cheaper goods to the consumer, this is the only thing that matters. Policy. So this happened in like the 1970s and 80s. Um, I think that these are things that are really working against Bernie. I think the mainstream media works against Bernie. They don't really want to give him any kind of coverage. They don't want to give him any kind of like representation on their news networks. I think that they try to vehemently fight back against him. I think that people are going to try to tarnish him with certain names. They're going to call him either this or they're going to call him a that when he's neither of them. It does feel that the voter is worried about age and health of Bernie Sanders. From what I've heard from like people out in general, they do seem to worry about the heart ailment that he had recently, and they do seem to bring up the age thing a lot. Um, there are a lot of headwinds against Bernie. Mainstream media against Bernie, the American narrative of the Red Scare against him, the yes to corporations against him, the lined pockets of what's left of the neoliberal Democratic Party. Nancy Pelosi, I think, is going to be against Bernie. I think you may even see Barack be against. So I think Bernie really has like everything against him except his grassroots movement, I would say.
Okay, so what do you think about Bernie sort of I guess you could say perhaps that Bernie sort of shares your view on like the media, because he has I guess he's called out sort of like during the debates, called out the advertisement of like pharmacies and stuff while he's
Mm-hmm.
giving his points and stuff, and I feel like that sort of led to him choosing to focus more on like independent media. I mean, I think he's been on TYT Network. He's been on Joe Rogan,
Mm-hmm.
probably a bunch of other places as well. Like, do you think
Yeah,
that's
he just did the interview with the other Bernie Sanders impersonator too.
yeah?
I don't know if you
So
saw that one.
I haven't yet, but I've actually bookmarked it. So um,
Yeah. So what's the question? Do I think it's
so
important that he's doing
do
that?
you think it's gonna make a difference? I guess. Do you think it's good, and do you think it's gonna make a difference?
I think it's good. I think it is making a difference. I don't think that it makes up for the lost airtime that he isn't getting. I think that it's him realizing that it's all hands on deck. I think that the Bernie movement, which is the largest grassroots movement ever in the history of the United States politics, um, is going to be doing anything that they can. I mean, just in Philadelphia here this week, it's December, it's cold as shit outside, and there's 3 planned canvases. People are going out Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday. To go knock on doors, to go spread the message. Thank you very much, True Leveler, for the raid. I appreciate that.
All right. So I guess sort of to build on his points that we talked about earlier. Is there something you disagree with Bernie on?
Yeah, I think that he needs to reevaluate the use of nuclear technology. He seems to be a little bit apprehensive of nuclear, and I am apprehensive of nuclear as well. But every day that we don't like transition more of our energy supply to things that are renewable. Even if we transition, I mean, you can look at lithium mining expeditions and everything. It creates like a lot of runoff and sludge and pollution of water tables. Um, Overall, however, though, I actually am with Bernie on about 98 to 99% of Bernie's policies, I would say. I think that he really provides like an actual accurate critique of where America's version of capitalism has grown to like power levels that are unsustainable. Um, and if Bernie doesn't get the nomination, I will be supporting whoever Bernie Sanders tells me to vote for. Since I trust Bernie Sanders enough to be the president of the United States, I also trust him to tell me who to vote for should he not get the DNC nomination.
So I guess, what do you think sort of his path to victory is in the primary? Like, how does he go from, I think, second place right now to sort of getting that jump, and I guess getting the delegates?
Yeah, I want him to come out like even stronger against industries that he doesn't like. You know, the highlight of the last debate for me was when he said there were oil companies that suppressed information since the 1970s and 80s about what they were doing with burning fossil fuels, and we're going to have to litigate against them, and we're going to have to take them to court. You know, I want to hear more of Bernie say like, hey, these banks that have engaged in like these terrible business loan practices and that have engaged in like usury and putting people into loans that they're never going to be able to pay out of, we need to litigate against them. We need to take into account environmental externalities. We need to revisit, you know, the Horizon BP spill. So I would like Bernie to double down, triple down, quintuple down on his actual like hardline stances of like, hey, listen, you know, we let these corporations get out of control. We let them abuse their power. We did allow them to capture the regulatory agencies. We did allow them to capture the pockets of politicians. I want to see him go full scorched earth and just say, you know, like the whole system has really been taken over by corporate interests. So yeah, I kind of want to see him go that route and really try to like invigorate like his base of support.
Do you think he's doing that during the debates? It seems like in the debates, I guess there's been sort of a mixed reception from what I've seen from like the left on how Bernie is doing in debates. He seems to like sort of hammer through like his main points, like Medicare for all and stuff, and like repeat sort of the same phrases and stuff. Do you think that's like the effective way to go about it?
Um, if I was Bernie's advisor, I would tell him to say more often, "I wrote the damn bill,"
Yeah.
and I wrote the critique. Like I kind of
Yeah.
want to see it. I kind of want to see it come from that avenue. But this is just me. You know, I don't know if that's going to speak to the broad populace. I don't know if that's going to like
Yeah.
rally votes or anything like this. But there is um, there is a big group of the American voting bloc that is angered by like the current state of the economy, and it appears that Trump capitalized on that in order to turn it to his position and to his side. And I think that Bernie needs to get the farmers, he needs to get the manufacturing workers, and he needs to get the like coal miners and everything on his side. And I think that if they actually like sat down and listened to him and looked at his Green New Deal policies and how he wants to transition the economy, I think that they would understand it, but it's difficult to get them to actually take it seriously.
Do you think that that would be sort of the main things deciding if Bernie was the one standing against Trump? Do you think those would be sort of the main things he would focus on?
Yeah, I think that Bernie can win on economics 100% all day, every day. I do not think that Trump's way is sustainable. I don't think that it is. Yeah, so I would say that he would have to go that way.
And
Sorry, I was trying to read something in my chat here real quick.
it's fine. Um, so I guess sort of to finish it off, looking at like what's the first thing that you'd like to see from like a Bernie presidency? Like if you were to be sort of the next president of the United States.
I want to see all of the people that go to watch his inauguration speech stay in Washington, D.C. and congest the city to no end, and make sure that like a nationwide movement starts. You know, Bernie has often said it's not about me, it's about us. And if he gets into office, it just has to be the start. Um, I think that people are going to need to mobilize. I think that people are going to need to protest. I think that we're going to need to boycott. So I actually don't want to see something per se from Bernie when he gets into office. I kind of want to see like the people that voted for him try to do anything that they can in order to show that we all need to work together, I would say.
Oh, and do you think Trump should be impeached? I guess sort of a side topic.
Yes, I do. Yes. Yeah, I do.
You've been watching the impeachments, right?
I've seen some of the impeachment, probably I would say like maybe 50 to 65% of it. It to me there's enough evidence out there of times that the executive office powers have been abused and misused. Even if you just want to be like simple and go with the emoluments clause. I was just reading the other day that was it $134 million have been spent on Trump properties during times that he's gone golfing to house like his like staff and everything like this. And instead of getting any type of discount, they've been charged the maximum allowable rate per room per night as allowed by federal law as to what like, the head of state can spend for his security detail and things like this. So
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's more or less it. Sort of. I guess the thing that I usually ask at the end is, like, are there other people, sort of hidden gems, that you would recommend for people to check out other than yourself?
like other streams to check out.
Streams or YouTubers that you really enjoy?
Yeah, I can talk about a couple. Two people that like just began streaming at the same time that I began are twitch.tv/Canadian Populist Left. Canadian Populist Left does a nighttime book reading stream from I believe it's like 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And he takes a book off his shelf, typically about like political economy or something like that, and does like a really good like book review stream. It's an excellent place to have like an educational experience. And another one of the people would be twitch.tv/SBTV underscore. They're my neighbors in Philadelphia. They talk about macroeconomics all the time. They're always looking at like headwinds. They're looking at debt defaults. They're looking at currencies and things like this. I like to watch the Caspian Report, which is a good YouTube channel. Caspian Report usually does like between 10 to 12 minute geopolitical breakdowns, maybe talking about like ports in Djibouti or how Romania is going to be involved in, the geopolitics of the region or things like this. Twitch and YouTube are both like very alive right now for people that are creating accessible informational content. And it's a really good place to be able to find a community, go in, like talk about things that might be outside of your wheelhouse, talk about things that you're very knowledgeable and comfortable about. So
All right. Well, thanks a lot for the interview. It was great, sort of picking your brain on a couple of things, and I hope it wasn't too scary.
Oh no, it wasn't. I still have like another 15 minutes or so if you like wanted to go any further. Time kind of like flew pretty quickly here. So if there
Yeah.
were things that you wanted to cover that we didn't get to cover, I do still have some time.
Well, I guess it's sort of. I do have some more questions, but it isn't necessarily something that I know. If you know something about, but we can sort of go through a little bit of it if you want.
Yeah, it's okay. It's not gonna upset me if I don't know. I'll just say that I don't know.
Sure. So sort of getting into U.S. foreign policy. I don't know if that's something you're interested in.
Yes, I am.
So, what do you in general think about sort of interventionalism versus sort of isolationism?
I think we need to redefine interventionalism in the 21st century and approve them through United Nations frameworks or international organization bodies. When would be the actual times to intervene? I think for too long we acted unilaterally, even though we're trying to say like, oh well, we had NATO backing or UN backing or something. I think that we kind of need to empower some of these treatized organizations in order to determine like a little bit more, I guess, globally when would be the times to try to intervene.
Yeah, so I guess people often, in terms of like when to intervene or something, they will often talk about sort of the UN or is it the UN who decides like human rights violations and stuff? I think it's the UN, right? So yeah, I guess what do you think about sort of international organizations like the UN or I guess NATO? in terms of like military.
Yeah, I think that they come from a good place conceptually. I don't think that they are functioning properly at the moment. Um, I think that we need to need to reevaluate like their power structures and how they're organized and how they like exist. But I do like the premise of them.
Have you sort of followed the whole Bolivia thing?
I have followed it, yes.
So I guess what do you think about sort of the concept of the OAS as an sort of an international organization? I guess.
It's excellent at promoting corporate interests for the United States.
All right.
That's like my simple answer to it. You can often find it behind nefarious deeds and activities, uh, typically trying to back multinational corporate interests, I would say.
So do you think the U.S. has sort of a responsibility to defend human rights abroad?
Do I think that we have say this again, sorry?
Do you think the U.S. has a responsibility to defend human rights like other places?
I do I think that we have a responsibility to defend human rights abroad? In some ways, I think that we do have that responsibility because of the way that we've acted over the past like 70 years, 80 years. So I think that we do have it at the moment. I think that I would like to see some more of it shift to international organizations, like I said, because we don't have a good track record of actually upholding that responsibility or, engaging in it appropriately.
So what about like in more of an economic sense? So do you think the US has a responsibility to lift other countries up economically by sort of I guess through trade deals or through building facilities in those countries, stuff like that?
There's a lot of damage that the United States did via these policies in the global south and in the Middle East over the past 40, 50, 60 years. We are going to have to play a role in unwinding the damage that we've done. Loaning countries money that they're never going to be able to pay back through the IMF, that they're just going to have to default on, and then putting sanctions on them when we say that they devalue their currency is not going to work. I don't have the entire answer for how to fix United States foreign policy in order to help other nations catch up to like some type of level of like I guess like developed economy per se, or like even like energy independent economies. If the United States doesn't begin to act within the international organizations, China is going to continue to do their Belt and Road Initiative until a majority of African capitals are vassaled to Beijing. And this has been happening in Sri Lanka, it's been happening in Kenya, it's happening in Ghana, it's happening in Djibouti, it's happening in Ethiopia. So as the United States is pulling back from its neo-imperialism, or however you wanted to call like our foreign policy over the past 40 or 50 years, other powers are going to assume that vacuum. I overall think that we really need to evaluate like a lot of our power systems per se, maybe.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. So I guess something interesting that I actually didn't consider before. You say you're really big on like environment in general, right? That's something that's important to you.
Yes, it is.
So what do you think about something like the Paris Climate Accords?
I liked them. I thought they were a great first step. I would like to see Bernie Sanders get back into it, in 2020, day one. I think that would be something kind of nice for him. I don't think that anybody is taking this conversation seriously enough. well, you can look at like I consider overfishing, a part of like climate problems and climate change. I consider pollution a part of it. I consider microplastics a part of it. I consider soil desertification a part of it. So I don't think that there is any type of unified global effort to actually really understand the severity of some of the problems and issues that could potentially be on the rise for global food systems, global trade systems, um, relations between nations, water supplies, access to clean drinking water, sustainability of like desert economies. I don't think that many people are taking that seriously enough.
So what about sort of the duality between like, or sort of, I guess, the China problem, as some call it, where um, in order for China sort of to capitulate to the Paris climate accords in like in a meaningful way, they sort of have to give up some economic growth that they sort of never had a chance to have because of I guess do you understand where I'm going?
Yeah, the next decade is going to be a very I think that we're coming into like the Green War, to call it something. We had the Cold War, which was like a standoff between like nuclear powers. I do think that we're going to get into a quote unquote green Cold War, where you're going to have some countries wanting to exert more pressure on other nations for their consumption practices. Um, this is where I again would want the United States to join together with the rest of the Americas and Europe in some type of organization to try to put pressure on nations that continue to burn through a lot of coal or things like this. I mean, but if you look at actual per capita emissions and if you look at like actual resource usage, I think the United States uses 30% of the world's resources for 5% of the population, and we create 30% of the world's waste, even though we just have 5% of the population. And per capita, we emit 2 times the amount of CO2 emissions as Chinese people do per capita. And I mean, okay, yeah, they still produce more, but.
Yeah, because I guess one of the critiques that I've seen often levied at sort of like the climate issue with China is that many or some people would say that the U.S. sort of got its heyday, got to where it is based on like sort of abusing fossil fuels and sort of messing
Mhm.
up the climate, and then when the U.S. is at a point where it's a superpower and it has all of this growth and a huge economy, then it says, okay, well, now we can't use fossil fuels anymore. Now you have to sort of play by the new rules, and it doesn't let the other countries sort of catch up in that sort of way. So the other countries have to sacrifice their living standards, their economy, in order to sort of clean up the mess that the U.S. made. Like, do you have any, I guess, thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do. I I'd like to throw a little bit more of an insult on the United States. The United States also exported a lot of its manufacturing to China when they were having their lax environmental policies, and then we just brought those goods back into the United States and didn't account for the emissions that were going to be, created by producing those goods. Hello, Angel. Nice to see you. As far as like how are these nations going to catch up or things like this? Um, I hope that they're going to do it with detailed plans of how they plan to transition away from these type of energy production sources over the next decade. I'm not really going to get too upset with a nation for what they're doing between right now and 2025, maybe even 2028. But if you're building new coal plants, if you're building new if you're exploring new like gas fields, past that time, I would kind of wonder, why aren't you looking into different styles of sustainability?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess you think that in general that I guess you're pro nuclear in that aspect.
Only because I think that we have to evaluate it. I don't like nuclear all that much. I think that it's kind of an example of kicking the can down the road for like another generation to deal with. And we're also having problems now as like as water temperatures begin to rise, nuclear isn't entirely as efficient as it once was because of that difference. And you also have to put it by a river or something like this, and rivers are having like problems as well. So nuclear isn't perfect. I mean, I really think the West or the developed world needs to consider deconsumption, degrowth, like using less energy. We can look at like statistics of, I think it's Sweden. I think that Sweden uses on average like 4 times more energy than citizens of the other parts of the world. Now that's in part because of heating costs or things like this.
Yeah, we do
But
so.
the
We do so in Denmark as well. We use way more. I think we have one of the highest per capita like consumptions in the world.
right,
Yeah.
right. So you know, like there's a lot that really needs to be evaluated when it comes to this conversation, I would say.
Yeah, I think it's sort of like an interesting conversation talking about like what do you value? Do you value because those countries, while they do have extreme amounts of consumption, they also have sort of the happiest populations, right? So like, would you value sort of the personal happiness of those people, or would you value sort of, I guess, put a cap on consumption in order to
I
like
don't
yes
I
save
don't know
money?
if they're entirely. I don't I would think that it's more of like social programs that are kind of helping citizens in those regions like be happier. You know, like
Hmm.
in the United States, people aren't all that happy because like they know that if they fall, they might like be out of work for 6 weeks or 6 months, and they might lose their health insurance, and then they might like go into bankruptcy and everything like this. So I think that the stability of the Nordic countries is what is more providing that happiness. But I don't entirely think that it's just like based on their consumption level, I would say.
All right. Well, I think that's what I had.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it. If you want to like get back together and do something like this in the future, I am pretty around. You know, I don't write my schedule down, but I'm going to work on trying to get that done.
for sure. I actually I really enjoyed it as well. You do speak very fast, so we got through a ton of stuff that I didn't think we were going to be able to. So that was actually really great. So yeah, I
Oh, okay.
enjoyed it a lot.
And I thought that I actually speak slowly.
No,
Um,
you're. I think you're like the fastest speak. I think in terms of like amount of topics we went through, I think this was like the one that I got to go through the most. So yeah.
oh, good. Well, that's also, well, I'll say like to return it to like the serious versus the joking nature. Um, I don't like to waste time like on formalities. You know, I don't like to. We're here to like exchange ideas. We're here to like get good concepts like spoken about. So I think that like the less that you can deal with like the banter and the back and forth, and the more that you can fill it with like actual dense like conversation, I really appreciate stuff like that. So
Yeah, and that's I guess that's also sort of what I try to go for with this sort of
mhm.
style. It's I try to do minimal pushback because I sort of want to get a be a vessel for like your ideas to sort of
Mhm.
yeah shine. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. I enjoyed it. This was excellent. Thank you so much for a great day. Where can some of my community find your stuff?
So you can find me on mostly on Twitter. That's where I'm most active on twitter.com/scuffedlefty or on
Hmm.
YouTube scuffed lefty and soon to be on Twitch as well, where I will periodically do some content hopefully. So yeah,
Awesome. Yeah, welcome.
thank you a
Uh,
lot
I will be seeing you around sometime soon, I'm sure.
very much.
Have a good evening.